This restoration comes at you by subscriber request. We are doing the Star Wars Death Star Space Station playset from 1979 from Kenner. Now before I go into this whole thing about how it's a restoration, that's a misnomer. It's really not a restoration. You can't restore a Death Star space station, not in the way that we restored the Millennium Falcon or another toy that has a core object. Like the Falcon, it was the fuselage that you sort of repair the rest of the parts on, whether they're the motor or get unbroken parts to replace it. With the Death Star, everything is breakable. Everything is part of the whole. There is no core. So in order to effectively put a Death Star space station together, you have one of two options. You either just forfeit the one you have and go out and buy one that's complete and unmolested, or you cobble together one from a bunch of unbroken parts, which usually involves a lot more than just this. You have to go out and get, well, more stuff.
An analysis of the plans provided by Princess Leia has demonstrated a weakness in the battle station.
If you weren't playing with Star Wars toys in 1979 or possibly 1980, you didn't know the Death Star existed. I got into Star Wars in 1982, and I didn't know the Death Star existed until 1987, when I walked into the room of one of my school friends, and his older brother had it set up in the corner. I stared at it for about 15 minutes before I realized, that's a Kenner Star Wars toy. Holy crap, that's the Death Star. And then after that, I found out his parents were going to sell it in a garage sale at school. So guess what? I showed up and bought it for $2. What I discovered was that the Death Star is not a tough toy. It's actually a very fragile toy. This is one of the panels, one of the levels from that Death Star that I got in 1987. As you can see, for some reason, the struts that are supposed to hold up the walls, that hold up the different levels of the playset, snap off easily under, I wouldn't say minimal conditions, but they snap off easily under robust play. So I had to kind of hold my Death Star together with a prayer. There are a lot of parts you're going to be looking for when you're piecing back together a Death Star space station. I want to start with the most important pieces, in my opinion, the struts that hold the levels up. The first thing I had to do was find struts that had pegs that were intact. This is a strut from my original one from '87, and it had a snapped off peg. You want to make sure that the pegs are intact on either side. Very important feature. Then what I had to do after that was make sure that I had all 9 struts. Now, something to note. These struts are identical, these struts are identical, but the 4 struts for the detention cell level look identical at a glance, but they're not. So when you're looking at online auctions, take note very carefully of the struts that they're offering, because obviously you want to make sure that when you get the parts in, you're getting all the parts you need. When I was going through this process, I felt like Jen in the Dark Crystal looking for the crystal shard.
You want a shard? Here.
This really is the most important first step, making sure that the superstructure of the playset is sound. There are other factors involved in this beyond the struts. For example, the levels that are actually going to attach to the elevator core. Now, as you can probably tell, this level is not being used because it has tabs, or supposed to have tabs, that attach to these points on the elevator setup. But if they're broken off, such as the case with this level, they're not going to do that. It's just going to slip off. And that happens a lot with these toys. You'll also notice that sometimes the elevator cores can have busted slots for those tabs. Depending on how much of a stickler you are, you might want to replace the elevator core as well, which is what I did with mine. This is really important in getting everything set up right the first time. You want to have all of this set up before you start putting other accessories on and going out and looking for all those smaller, harder to find parts. Because what's going to end up happening is you're going to buy all these higher priced pieces only to find out you don't have anything to attach them to because your superstructure is falling apart. In the next chapter of this restoration, we're going to clean all the parts and get them ready and then assemble the superstructure and determine what we need for the next stage.